Hello everybody, and thank you for watching this video. In this video we're going to be talking about service leadership and the service profit chain. We're also going to be giving you a rundown on what to expect for the remainder of the course, some changes to evaluations, and the weightings for the previous assignments. More specifically, here are some of our weekly topics. We're going to be talking about the changes to the course. We're going to be talking about leadership versus management and how those two things differ. We're also going to be talking about leadership theories, just to give you some of the basics about what leadership is and how we've thought of it as it's progressed through time. We're going to be talking about appropriate leadership styles within a food service context. We're going to introduce the idea of the internal customer, the service profit chain, and the effects of the service profit chain, how we employ it, how we implement it, and how we measure that it's working. So a bit about our changes to the course before we get into our content for the week. Content is going to be shared with you using pre-recorded lecture videos. Some other professors are choosing to do live lectures on Blackboard, Collaborate, or even Teams. However, we're a little uncertain right now about how well the technology can keep up with so many people using it at once. So to avoid any possible hiccups going forward, I'm just going to record the lectures and create a video so that you can watch it. Okay. I do agree, however, that there needs to be a live component to our course, so that you can ask questions, get feedback, and just have some interaction with me live. So I'm going to hold office hours every Monday from 1 p.m. till 2:30 p.m. They will be on Collaborate, so you just log into Collaborate like you normally would. I'll be there. You can post your questions that you might have to the chat, or if you'd like to verbalize them, just say in the chat, "Hey Dave, I got a question," and I'll speak to those questions in the order that they are presented to me in. It's just some online etiquette with respect to Collaborate. You're going to be able to use some functionality of Collaborate, so you're going to be able to mark stuff up. Let's just kind of keep it professional. Leave the whiteboard to me so I can use it to help answer questions. And yeah, so again, just respect should govern our behavior. I'm still going to be available by email. I apologize if you emailed me during this week, or when you're viewing this, be the previous week. We were very busy putting all of the theory courses online, and I just haven't been able to keep up with the emails at this time. But rest assured, I'll be able to answer your emails in our live office hours, or soon I'll be addressing the emails I have in my inbox. Here is some of our weekly topical changes. Now, the reason I've had to change our weekly topical for this course is because the previously established topics were helping you to engage in a service ethnography. At this time, we can't do an ethnography. It would be unrealistic to expect students to be going out into the public to collect information. So with that in mind, I've dropped the ethnography assignment and I've changed it, which I'll talk to about in a second. I've also had to change up the topical, or the content of this course, to help prepare you for your assessments. Okay, so this week we're talking about the service leadership and service profit chain. We have 2 readings. They're not huge, and it's really more the concept of those readings that I want you to understand, not necessarily the methodology or the relevant literature. It's more the practical basis of those readings. Okay, so this week we're talking about service leadership. We got some readings, and your personal reflection is due March 27th. I had previously said that it was due a week earlier, but because there was a lot of uncertainty with what was going on in school, I figured an extra week wouldn't hurt, and I'm sure you agree that the extra time would be warranted. If you've already submitted your personal reflection and you want to make some changes to your reflection, I'll allow people to submit again, or resubmit if you will, and I'll mark the most recent submission. Next week, or week 13, we're going to be talking about empowerment, service predisposition, and training for service. We're not just going to be talking about employee empowerment, we're also going to be talking about customer empowerment and service predisposition. Service predisposition is just the idea that some people are just predisposed to give good service. And it comes down to a little bit of personality, but also some traits as well. You have two readings there as well. One by Holcutt and Stone, the effect or the impact of employee empowerment on service quality and recovery effort. And we also have a paper by Crawford. It details hospitality operators' understanding of service. So it's going to tell us how they believe quality of service can be measured on an individual basis. Continuing from the previous slide, we have week 14, which will be April 6th to April 10th. We are not going to have any content that class because I want everyone to focus on the final case study, which is a new assignment. Again, I'll be talking about it in a second. You're going to have to submit on April 10th a written report from a consultancy perspective and how you would solve the issues that are present in the case. Okay, you can use Collaborate for student meetings, so I'll be opening up open-ended sessions for groups, so you can meet on Collaborate. You can also meet on Teams if you're more comfortable with that, whatever you think is best. It will be a group assignment, which I'll talk about in a second, because in the learning outcomes for this course, group work is an outcome, and I have to hit at least 80% of the outcomes, which means that I have to make sure that you're working in teams at some point. Week 15, so April 13th to the 17th, that is technically the last week of the semester. I've posted no content or assessments for that week, so technically our course ends on April 10th, or I'll even say we'll have the report due April 12th instead of the 10th to give you Sunday. But if there are changes, and understand that the COVID-19 situation is very fluid and we're making changes to our course as quickly as possible, I'm assuming or have made an assumption, worst case scenario, that we may have to end the course or the term a week early, but that's not set in stone. It's not even being talked about right now. It's just me planning for the worst. Okay, we've also mapped out your assessments in the BCom program, and me having your assignment due the week before last, the last week, is going to help you spread out your assessments over the next 4 weeks. So you're not being expected to do 4 assignments or complete 4 tests or assignments in the very last week. So here are some of the changes to the assessments for the course. 3 of these will likely you'll already be aware of already. For example, your weekly classwork, which was a combination of in-class participation, which we've spoken about, and your reading reflections from the first 7 weeks of the course. Your midterm exam, which you've already taken. Your personal reflection, which again is due this week. And the final case study. So that's the only new one. You're going to be given a written case. You're going to be asked to identify what the problems are and the causes of the problems in the case. You're going to offer some recommendations to fix those problems. You're going to show how it could be implemented and how you would measure whether your initiatives have been successful or not. I've also had to reweight some of the items in the course. For example, weekly coursework, the midterm exam, I believe it was 20% before. I've had to increase it to 25. I've had to increase your personal reflection to 20% of your overall grade, and your final case study will be 30%. Again, if you have questions about these, feel free to ask during live office hours on Mondays between 1 and 2:30 p.m. So just a few notes about your final case study. You're going to be using the groups that you are going to use for your ethnography assignment. I will be posting those to the assignment tab this week. I want you to read the case study. I want you to read the instructions. please, in your report, follow the format provided. So there's a breakdown that case study reports usually come in. Again, it is 30% of your overall grade, and there is a general rubric attached. Okay, so please take some time earlier on in the week to familiarize yourself with the final case study. Reason I'm saying that is because you and your group should be able to start working on it right away. Okay, so you should be able to read the case, identify some issues that are going on, and what is causing those issues. So while some of you have probably learned about leadership before, I think it's important to kind of go over or recap what leadership is, what it's not, what different styles there are, which one is best applied to service, because you'll see that the service profit chain is highly dependent upon good leadership, and we'll go over that in just a second. But leadership, as a general definition, leadership happens from and to people. It involves trust, relationships, and collaboration to bring about the attainment of a collective goal. So basically, you have a goal as a food service manager or as a chef that you can't complete or achieve by yourself. You need followers, and to attain that goal, you need to build trust and relationship and collaboration with your followers to help you achieve that goal. Okay, where leadership differs from management is management happens to things, never people. Okay, examples of management can be, or examples of things that need to be managed are generally speaking resources, so money, hours, inventories, but never people. Okay, managers manage resources, leaders lead people. Okay, again, leadership is something that happens to and from people. Managers manage or allocate resources. Okay, while as a manager, a food service manager, or as a chef, you have a need to manage resources, you also have an equally important need to lead people, but also lead people successfully. I'm sure through your experiences at work or your externships, you probably have some good examples of good leaders and some really awesome examples of terrible leaders. Okay, these are the things that we draw on as aspiring or developing leaders to help us develop and move forward and lead people better. So now that we've given a general definition and contrasted what leadership is versus management, it's important we're going to talk about some of the very general leadership theories that exist. Okay? Earlier on, when leadership was becoming an academic area of study, one of the very first leadership theories were the big man theories. Okay, so this is the idea that basically men, charismatic men, are best to lead. Obviously, history and just common sense nowadays has since disproven this theory, in that gender is no indication on a person's ability to lead, manage, or even develop as a leader. However, charismatic people do tend to have higher levels of leadership. They have the ability to captivate, a team or a workforce, but this is not the only trait that good leaders have. There are many others. But again, big man theories were some of the earlier theories in leadership and have obviously been disproven time and time again, because gender is absolutely no indication of a person's ability to lead. The next, as we progress through time, the next kind of leadership theories that scholars started researching were called trait theories. Trait theories were created in an attempt to create essentially a list of all the traits successful leaders had. If these scholars could identify these traits, we could also identify what would be great leaders and help them develop earlier, or explain why people with specific traits failed as leaders. Some of these traits are true. For example, being charismatic. But however, researchers did produce a list, and it was a very, very big list of traits, which pretty much meant that anybody could be leaders. So while there wasn't a whole lot of significance from trait theories in that basically everybody can be a leader, the one positive contribution trait theories had was that leaders are created and developed. They are not born. Because a lot of these traits that we found can be mentored and developed over time. Trait theories were a good stepping stone or a good progression from the great man, from the big man theories, in that it wasn't about gender, or any something that would be silly like gender. It was more about the traits of people that captivated or motivated a workforce or a set of followers to help them achieve the goal that they were going for. But this wasn't the last step in leadership theories. Once people found out that leaders can have a wide range of traits and they're all successful, they started to focus less on the traits of leaders. They started to focus more so on what leaders do, which led to what we call behavioral theories, which we'll talk about next. The last kind of leadership theories that we're going to talk about is behavioral theories. Behavioral theories were much more focused on learning about what successful leaders did, or the behaviors of successful leaders, opposed to the traits that they had, or the traits that they exhibited anyway. And this kind of research produced very popular leadership styles within food service, primarily transformational leadership, but more importantly, or primarily, the servant leader, which is when a lot of people talk about service leadership, whenever they're talking about service leadership, they usually mean the servant leader, which we'll talk about in just a second. You'll find that the reason why we're talking about the servant leader is because this is a crucial leadership style within food service, but it's also crucial for how we add value and how our staff can create value. The servant leader. The servant leader has been, or the servant leadership style has been identified as the most appropriate leadership style for service firms, especially food service. The role of the servant leader is to cater to and make sure that his or her employees are satisfied and that they have everything they need to do their job. The servant leader supports staff more than they do any other activity. For example, myself as a servant leader, I was both a manager, server, cook, host, dishwasher, whatever I needed to be for my staff at a particular point in time. More an in-depth example, I suppose, is a usual shift at the restaurant with me. I was running food, I was seating the door, I was serving tables, I was taking payment, I was jumping on the line, I was putting glasses through the dishwasher. And that's how I led, is I did and supported my staff in what they were doing. I also listened to what their needs were. If someone was having a hard time making a particular shift, we could change up the time. If someone was having a problem at home, we could revisit the schedule or give somebody the day off. I made sure that my staff believed that I had their best interests in mind. Okay. For example, I knew staff that wanted to be busy during their shift to make a lot of money, and I helped them do that. At the same time, I know staff that they were happy with a 3-table section, and that's what I did. I gave it to them just to make sure that they were getting what they were wanted, and through my actions and behaviors, I made sure that they were supported. And this is really what the servant leader does. So why is servant leadership identified as the most appropriate for food service or service firms? Well, as you may recall from the beginning of the semester, service is about emotions, memories, relationships, and expectations. And so is servant leadership. You may recall that from our reading that our staff engage in emotional labor, which can be alienating at times, because if they're, having a bad day or they don't want to be overly friendly on a particular hour, they still have to make it look like they're happy and that they're having a good time to incite the same emotions in their guests. This can be alienating because it's not their own emotion. They're being forced to showcase that emotion when they're not actually feeling it. However, if we make our staff happy, which is a lot about what servant leadership is, again, relationships, expectations, support, they'll be happy, which means they don't need to engage in emotional labor because they're already happy and they're already exhibiting the emotions that they want to elicit from their customers. There are a few other consequences, positive consequences of servant leadership that we will review in a few slides. Before we do, we really have to, and to truly answer the question, why servant leadership in service, we need to adopt a more stakeholder perspective to show you why our staff is so important in what we do. So here we're going to talk about the stakeholder view, or stakeholder perspective, which emanates from stakeholder theory in organizational theories, or research, coined by Ed Freeman in the 1980s, I believe. It was the idea that within an organization, power is not distributed equally, which also means that our stakeholders, or people that depend or have an impact on an organization, we need to pay attention to them. We have to make sure their expectations are met, and if we don't, they will no longer participate with the firm. So where a lot of people believe your customer stakeholder group is important, and it is, it's not the only important stakeholder group. Just as a quick example here, sure, your customers have the power in the relationship with your business, in that if you don't meet their expectations, they're going to take their money somewhere else. However, could we not argue that employees, if we don't meet our employees' expectations and their needs, they're going to take their labor and productivity elsewhere as well? And a big point of what I'm trying to get here, and you've probably heard this saying, is the customer is always right. However, they're not always right. There's also, given that, there's other salient other stakeholder groups that we need to pay attention to, which I'll describe in the next slide. Continuing with the stakeholder view or perspective, given the example before that customers in food service can choose to go somewhere else with their money if their expectations are met. In a very similar way, so can our staff or our employees. In many ways, our employees have the exact same power as our customers, which brings up the notion of a business's internal customer, in that we have to make sure the expectations of our staff, who are our external customer, are met, so they continue to participate with us and do their job properly. It's also important to recognize that as management, we don't serve our customers, our staff do. That's frontline staff in food service, that's hosts, that's servers, that's bartenders, even line cooks. You don't make, as a manager or a chef, you may not make your customers' food, your cooks do, right? So we need to make sure that our people, our staff, who are delivering value to our guest, we have to make sure that their expectations are met and that they're supported, so that they'll continue to do the best job they can for us, but also create happy external customers. So we've trying to show you here how servant leadership can be applied, in that servant leadership isn't about the customer is always right. It's more about putting your people first. So just a few more points about our internal customer, which again is our staff. We should be putting our employees first so they can put our external customers first. Again, the relationship our customers have with our business is through our frontline staff, so our hosts, servers, bartenders, cooks. To employ or to satisfy our internal customer, we have to make sure our internal customer expectations are met and that they're loyal to us. Only when our staff are satisfied and loyal can they truly put our customers first. In order to cultivate happy, satisfied, and loyal internal customers, we first have to kind of know what our staff care about. Now, in your own head, you can probably think of some examples of, what you care about or what expectations you have from your employer. I'm going to give some of the theoretical ones here. Okay, so forces for motivation for our staff can be, generally speaking, lumped into two sources of motivation. One is internal, the other one is external. These can also be called intrinsic and extrinsic forces of motivation. So internal forces of motivation, these are things like a sense of accomplishment, satisfaction, not rewards, but like basically any motivation that comes from your person. You want to do a good job, you feel excited and you want to do your job and you want to feel accomplishment, things like that. Whereas external forces for motivation comes from sources of motivation that exist outside of your person. So this is rewards, this is compensation, this is benefits, this is usually comes in some sort of monetary form, right? So it's the difference between being acknowledged for being employee of the month versus getting an extra $50 on your paycheck, right? So again, internal and external. The difference between these two also represents the difference between Maslow's higher and lower needs on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I'll show you in a second. Internal motivation comes from higher order needs, for example, self-actualization, relationships, things like that. External motivation comes from needs on the lower side of the pyramid. So this is again compensation, shelter, things like that. The general idea here isn't necessarily to lump or go into work one day and be like, is that person externally or internally motivated, or where does this person fit on Maslow's hierarchy? That's not what I'm suggesting here. I'm just kind of giving the theoretical basis of it. It's that each staff member of your team wants something. It's your job as a leader to understand what that is. I've heard this concept called currency. So you have to find out what your specific staff members' currency is. For example, if I know someone wants to come into work, one of my servers, and wants to make a lot of money that day, I know exactly how to motivate that person. I also know how exactly to get what I want out of that person. Whether that's following rules, standards, things like that. Whereas somebody's, having a bad day and maybe they just want a slower night, I can make that happen too. And when I do that, I'm building a relationship, I'm building trust, I'm being a good leader because I know what they want and I'm striving to support them in meeting their expectations. So again, when you're approaching this kind of material, you don't necessarily need to, go into work and, try and, again, figure out where, Jim and Sally fit on Maslow's hierarchy. It's a matter of a conversation, like, how was your day? What's going on? You can figure out what people want by just having a conversation. So here is our boy Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At the very bottom of the triangle is physiological needs. So these are things like basic needs, so water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing, even reproduction. Next up the scale is safety needs. So this is personal security, employment, resources, health, property. Next is typically called relationships. Here it's called love and belonging. So this is the need for friendship, intimacy, family, and a sense of connection. Second to last is esteem. So this is, status, recognition, freedom, strength, recognition, right? And then the very tip of the iceberg, not the iceberg, the triangle here is self-actualization. So this is the desire to be the most one can be. So, developing and things like that. The kicker to Maslow's hierarchy of needs is you cannot attain higher needs, so you can't move up the triangle as you want. You have to satisfy lower order needs first in order to move up. So, for example, for me to meet my for me to fulfill my self-esteem or my esteem needs, I first have to find some sort of sense of connection or love and belonging and satisfy that need before I move up the triangle. So again, our external needs or external forces of motivation usually exist around physiological needs or safety needs, in that resources, employment, security, those things can be provided with money, right? So it's the need of collect as many resources as possible so that we can satisfy our physiological and safety needs, whereas our higher order needs, so relationships, esteem, self-actualization, those are obviously internal to the person and would be examples of internal forces of motivation. So again, as I previously mentioned, we use Maslow's as a general, as a way to map out people's needs, maybe not expectations, but also forces for motivation, okay? At any one time, anybody can be placed on this triangle. However, I'm not suggesting, again, you go into work and look at Jim and place Jim on this hierarchy of needs to figure out how to motivate him. This is much more easily accomplished by having a conversation with Jim, figuring out what he wants so you can get his currency and his buy-in, and and gather motivation towards accomplishing your goals. This is what leaders do. So here's where we start to connect some of the concepts that we've talked about so far. So from previous slides, we've identified that servant leadership is most appropriate for food service, and the servant leader puts his people first, or his or her people first, by understanding what their needs, expectations, and wants are, so that they can, it's the role of the servant leader to support and make sure his or her staff is happy, right? We talked about motivation, so that is essentially figuring out how to make your staff happy, make them feel like they're supported. And we take those two, we put them together, we get an idea called the service profit chain. The service profit chain is very simply the idea that if we put our staff first, they can put our customers first. It's also built off the idea that if we can increase employee satisfaction and loyalty, we can also increase customer satisfaction and loyalty. If you've heard the saying before, happy wife, happy life, it's very similar, except happy staff, happy customers. If you recall our conversations on emotions in service, it should come to no surprise that happy staff make happy customers. The chain is where value is added in a service firm, and it all starts with the leader. So the leader creates value for staff. Staff can then better create value for customers, which should be observable in customer satisfaction and customer loyalty through repurchase intentions, repeat visits, but also positive word of mouth, and what's the last one? Very similar. Positive word of mouth and customer referrals. So here are the links in the service profit chain. It is composed of the operating system or service delivery system of a service firm or restaurant. It has several components to it as we start from employee satisfaction, resulting in revenue growth and profitability. Some of the important chains here, pieces in the chain, is employee satisfaction, as we've already talked about. Once employees are satisfied, employee retention should increase, as well as employee productivity. So we're not losing our employees because they're happy and they're loyal. and employee productivity is also increasing. So they're serving our customers better, which turns into external service value, right? So this is serving customers better or adding value, more value to our customers, which creates customer satisfaction. Okay, so meeting customers' needs and their expectations. Disconfirmation, as we have heard from Oliver, the scholar on customer expectations. As we meet those expectations, we create customer satisfaction, which is an antecedent of customer loyalty, which can be seen in customer retention, repeat business and customer referrals, so positive word of mouth, all of which create revenue growth and profitability. These are the two important factors for the service profit chain. These are the benefits of the service profit chain. Okay, so employee satisfaction is a benefit, customer satisfaction is also a benefit. The end result or benefit to our businesses is revenue growth through customer loyalty. So people are coming back to the restaurant time and time again. This means we have what we call regulars or regular customers. And because our revenue is growing and we're not having to spend additional marketing monies, because this is built into the service design of a restaurant, we're having increased profitability. Okay, but again, the kicker, or what starts this chain of events happening, if you will, is internal service quality, where again the employee is the internal customer. So drivers of internal service quality is workplace design, employee selection and development, which we'll talk about next week, employee rewards and recognition. So that's rewards would be external motivation, recognition is internal recognition, and then tools for serving customers. So again, making sure that our employees are supported in their delivery of external service value. So as we create higher levels of internal service quality, we create more satisfied employees, which increases employee retention and employee productivity, which increases the external service value that we're delivering to customers, which in turn results in customer satisfaction, loyalty, and revenue growth and profitability for our businesses. Here we're going to revisit the first link in the chain, which was internal service quality, or ISQ. The level of internal service quality really dictates the level of employee satisfaction, thus customer satisfaction, and loyalty and growth. Internal service quality has a very academic definition to it. For our purposes, it's essentially the service management teams, the service that we as management or as leaders provide to our staff. Okay, increasing internal service quality can take many forms, as we've already talked about. So compensation, rewards, recognition, tools to help them serve customers better, all those things, which is great. And you can instill those things in your operation. But one way to make sure or to increase internal service quality is through leadership abilities on the part of services management, through what we've already discussed as servant management. So supporting your staff, understanding what they want to gain motivation from them, making sure they have the tools that they need, and really being there as, providing service for your employees. In contrast, I've had experiences earlier on in my career where I was much more of the carrot and stick kind of leader, so basically rewards or punishment, and that did take me a certain distance. However, I found that as I engaged with my staff, as I learned about them, what motivates them, as I learned how to support them, I became more of a servant leader, and I was a lot more successful later on in my career as a result. I could walk into buildings that I had never managed before, spending a day or two with the staff, and I could lead really successful shifts because I understood who my employees were, what they wanted, what they liked, what they didn't like, and how best to serve or support them in them putting our customers first. It's also important to note that without the first link in the chain, which is a high level of internal service quality, there can be no service profit chain. It really sets off the chain of events that leads towards profitability and revenue growth. Again, increased internal service quality leads to increased employee satisfaction, in turn leads to increased customer satisfaction and loyalty, which turns into profitability and revenue growth, which means that we have a need in our industry for really good leadership, in this case, servant leadership. You'll find that in our industry, some of you may have experienced this already, some of you not, that leadership in some cases is an area of opportunity with some restaurants, right? Like I told you before, I was not a very good leader at first, okay? But leadership can be developed and has a great impact on not only your staff, but your customers as well. So it's important for us to develop as servant leaders. So how do we develop as leaders? I think I may have mentioned this before, but firstly, leaders are made, not born. Okay, despite very common discourse to the opposite. You know, for example, she's a natural born leader. You know, while people may display common leadership or common good leadership traits, true leadership, true good leadership is an ongoing learning and development journey. Nobody expects you to be a great leader off the bat. It's something that you learn and hone over the course of your career. Okay, the more we practice leadership and read about it, the better we get at it. Mistakes happen. Okay, we were never meant to get this right the first time. Okay, it does not. Even when mistakes happen, it doesn't mean that we weren't. We're not going to be a good leader. It just gives us an opportunity to learn from something to develop into a good leader. While development or leadership development can exist in a form that is employee or self-started, right? So if you've decided to be develop your leadership abilities, you can do that on your own. However, in some cases, there's actually formal intentional leadership development programs in some service businesses, not normally in food service. So I'm going to give you a couple of tactics today to implement some easy ways and cost-effective ways to implement leadership development programs in food service. One of the very first and very cost-effective leadership development tactics we're going to talk about is called 360-degree feedback. It's the idea that you, as a leader, ask people from multiple departments or perspectives in the organization about how you're doing as a leader, right? That way everyone has an opportunity to give you feedback on how well you're doing and where you can improve. Because you're asking multiple people from multiple different perspectives or departments, so this is the front of house, the back of the house, prep team, service team, bartender team, host team, cook team, you'll have a better or more holistic idea of where where your opportunities would be, right? One of the pieces of feedback that I was given was that people thought that this is actually a bad example, but it's a good example of one of my previous points, my next points, which I'll come back to in a second. Asking for feedback can be difficult to do because nobody really likes to get feedback. You know what I mean? No one likes to hear where you're not, an area where you're not good at or where you can improve, right? But it's very critical that you do, okay? You have to remember that no one expects you to get leadership right or even, service right the first time, right? It's a learning and a development process. And as you gain that feedback, you can be better, right? There's also research to show that as you engage in 360 feedback, because you're opening yourself up to the opinion or the evaluation of what would be a follower, that trust between the follower and the leader is increased. It's called after event reviews. So, if I ask a bunch of people, for their opinion or their feedback for me, I'm opening up myself to their criticism. And as I do that, trust is instilled between me and that person because it shows that I trust you to give me feedback, and I'm vulnerable in asking that, and because trust is two ways, and well, between a follower and a leader, it's two ways. We've established trust between you and that person. It's really about opening yourself up and being vulnerable to the criticism of other people. And when you do, trust is instilled between you and that person. I would, however, mention that you have to be careful about who you ask, because as the boss, remember you're in boss school, you're going to be the boss, and because you're the boss, some people are going to want to please you. So you're going to say, hey, give me some feedback on how I'm doing. Somebody, who just wants to please you or tell you, you know what I mean. They don't want to give you negative feedback because they're afraid you might change their schedule on them, or give them a smaller section, or reduce their shifts or something like that. They're going to tell you what you want to hear, right? So one time I was asking for feedback, doing 360 feedback in the restaurant, and I asked a lady. Now this person, the reason I asked her in the first place is she was very critical about a lot of things in the restaurant, okay? And I thought maybe by asking somebody that was critical about other things, she could be critical about me, all right? She would at least have some feedback, right? She was very particular about her shifts. She was very particular about which shift she got and how long. Anyway, it's a long story. So I asked her how I was doing, and she's like, "Oh, you're doing great. I love working with you," even though pretty sure she did not love working with me. You're doing great. Keep it up, and I don't think you need to work on anything. You're doing a great job, and hurrah, and blah blah blah. Which is nice to hear, but it's not the point of 360 feedback. And she wasn't being honest with me, because I asked 6 other individuals, and they all gave me feedback, a lot of which was pretty, upon reflection, it was pretty true, right? So 6 people told me I got to work on a few things. One was, assigning proper sections or equal sections, and this person was like, "Oh no, you're perfect. You're great. You're amazing. You're better than sliced bread." So you got to be careful who you ask, because some people are just going to want to please you because they don't want to upset you and negatively affect them. So that's an indication of a lack of trust. So again, you got to be careful who you ask. You want to make sure that people are giving you honest feedback, and there are going to be some people that cannot give you honest feedback. So if you ask somebody, in my case, I asked that person with the intention of getting some critical feedback. She wasn't going to be able to provide it. Told me I was doing great. I was talking to other people, I was able to kind of discard her feedback because it was obviously not feedback at all, for that matter. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is just remember, you're the boss, and some people are just going to want to please you. So be careful about who you ask for feedback. Job rotations are another tactic we can use to increase the development for potential leaders. Having managers do job rotations basically takes them from one role as a manager to another role as a manager. In the kitchen, the chef, it's kind of hard to do this with the chef, because the chef is kind of everybody at the same time. For example, a chef is, technically not a sous chef, but does the job of a sous chef when need be. For me, in the front of house, managers have different areas of responsibility, and we move, every 6 months to a year, we would switch up responsibilities and the teams that we were responsible for, right? So I was normally responsible for the bartenders and the host staff. After 6 months to a year, they would say, "Dave, okay, you're no longer responsible for the host staff, the bartenders and the bar, or the reservations and the host staff. You're now responsible for development. You're the development manager. So you do training, you do hiring. You're the hiring manager now." So I'm not only exposed to a different set of routines, but I'm also exposed to a different set of staff. The idea here is that a leader must be experienced in managing or leading all people within an organization. Now, if you think about that, the people in your organization or service firm are very diverse, right? You need to be able to lead a diverse team because you don't get to choose who you work with. So you need to be able to lead people from different perspectives, different walks of life, different ways of thinking and things like that to truly be a good leader. The idea here is that you kind of corral the organization to a common goal. And you can't do that without being able to understand and lead different perspectives from a diverse group of people. And job rotation helps leaders or developing leaders just do that by exposing them to different groups of people and different responsibilities. If you've ever watched the show Undercover Boss, it's not quite a job rotation, but kind of is, because they take the boss or the leader of the organization, they put him or her in a different role on the ground floor. So that's frontline staff or manufacturing, or where essentially the leader is not the leader anymore. In doing so, they expose the leader to people he wouldn't normally be working with or might not understand. So the leader can learn from that experience and be able to lead those people better. It's a lot about learning your people. In the back of the house, again, it's difficult because there's one chef, and however, there are different responsibilities within the back of the house. There's ordering, there's hiring, there's inventory, there's prep lists, like weekly prep lists and stuff like that. Having your sous chef team rotate between these responsibilities has them exposed to different people. For example, ordering and inventory, you're going to be working with a lot of prep cooks. If it's more on the execution side, you're going to be working with a lot of frontline cooks. So again, rotating your management team around these responsibilities is a great way to develop a leader. I've also seen front of house and back of house staff rotate into the front and to the back. For example, one of my sous chefs, probably 3 years ago now, was a sous chef, transitioned in the front of the house as a manager, and as a result of that is actually now a GM of a restaurant. I had a general manager. He was a GM for probably 2 years. He got a little stagnant in his leadership and his motivation. I think he got kind of bored, if you will, and we rotated him into the back of the house. He was much more successful, and he learned how to be a leader. He developed as a leader because he was exposed to a new group of people, right? And he was able to return as the GM of the restaurant and lead the restaurant to higher performance metrics, because he was exposed to the area of the restaurant that needed a bit more development. So there's two tactics left I'd like to talk about, and then I have some leadership lessons and some concluding slides. Here we're going to talk about reflection. Okay, when I talk about reflection, it's a matter of thinking about what has happened, how it made you feel, how it made somebody else feel, and how you could be better. Okay, while giving feedback to developing leaders is exceptionally important, reflection of events is equally important. Any leadership development program I've researched or been a part of, reflection is the key piece to every single leadership development program. It allows people to grow, but you grow based on what you think or where you think you can improve, right? Excuse me. Reflection doesn't need to be something fluffy or soft or something wishy-washy. It's very simple, and it has great impact on developing leaders and helping them grow. And it's as simple as asking yourself, well, how did that go? How did that shift go? Or could I have done something different? Over the course of a shift, you're going to, as a leader, as a chef or a sous chef or a front of house manager or GM, you're going to work with people all day. And when you're reflecting on these situations, how could you have interacted with these people better to have a better outcome? It doesn't have to be something that is, regularly scheduled. Eventually, as you start asking these questions, it's going to become more routine or common for you. For me, um, my reflection period would be when I would drive home from work. You know what I mean? So I'd be driving home, the music would be on, and I'd just be like, how did my shift go? Where could I have improved today? Um, after, I mean, like, reflection is a safe space where you get to ask yourself, like, okay, how could I have been better? How could I have led my team better today? What worked well? What didn't work well? For example, and it changes based on the group that you're leading. In one restaurant, I had a after shift meeting. It was a terrible night. It was a gong show of a night. Um, and I had an after service meeting with my service staff that were on that day, and I was very critical of their performance. Right, it was perceived pretty well because I had built up that trust with them and that relationship with my staff, so they knew that I was coming from a vulnerable spot. In that I wanted them to improve. I wasn't just giving them trouble or grief. I went to a new restaurant and I did the same thing. I had a really terrible night. Pretty much everything you can think of went wrong. And after service, I pulled them all my servers aside, and I was like, "This was terrible. This is what it is." Um, and everyone reacted very poorly when I did that. It was also my second shift there. But that's the kicker, right? So I was reflecting on it on the way home. I'm like, okay, so why did one set of staff not freak out when I was critical of them, to some degree. And I do the exact same thing with another set of staff members at, a different restaurant, same brand, okay? And they reacted completely opposite. The difference between the two, as I reflected, was the one restaurant where it was perceived fairly well was I had built trust and relationships with those staff. So they knew I wasn't aiming to demean or hurt them. I was helping them be better and me be better as well. In the other restaurant where I was newer, I had not built those relationships or that trust. But it was, that was a huge revelation I had come to, but it was only possible because I reflected on what happened the second time I did that. There's been so many examples of me reflecting that have led to aha moments that you just can't think of in the moment, and it wouldn't have been possible without reflection. My last example would be during my MBA. I was always the accounting dude. Any group I was ever in, there was always an accounting piece to any project that we had to do, and I was automatically the accounting guy. I automatically did all the income statements, balance sheets, cash flows, financial analysis, everything. I was always that guy. No, I still was, but there was one particular assignment where we were under a 2-hour time crunch to complete a case study and a presentation for a particular case. I forget what it was. I think it was Mountain Men Brewing. Anyway, it doesn't matter. And everyone was like, Dave, like I was doing my piece and I was crunching away, and when I get in the zone with the accounting, I just tune everything out and I focus on the numbers and focus on what I'm doing, right? And you do what you do your part in the project and I'll do mine, right? So I'm plugging away and I'm doing the accounting piece, and everyone's like, Dave, what do you think, Dave? What do you think? Can we do this? Can we do that? Can we, you know what I mean? They're asking me a whole bunch of questions about the direction of the project, and I'm like, that's a really weird question to be asking me because I'm doing the accounting piece. It wasn't until I reflected on all the stuff that went on then that, sometimes people don't ask you to be a leader. You just either are or not for them, right? In this case, I wasn't a leader for my group when they were looking for me to be a leader. So again, I would not have come to that realization without some degree of reflection of what has happened. Case studies can also be used for leadership development. They're not really used in our industry for leadership development, but they are in a lot of other industries. For example, fuel and oil. Shell Oil does a management development program or a leadership development program in which they use a lot of case studies. I would mention case studies in this case because sometimes we can't expose developing leaders to nasty situations, or we don't know what they would do if they were put into a specific situation. Case studies can be used exactly for that. Okay, so it also encourages reflection. You can have developing leaders demonstrate the ability to apply leadership strategies, or even, but mainly expose them to challenging situations. Case studies can take the form of, here's a case. I want you to understand what the problem is. I want you to give me some recommendations and give me an explanation why, and tell me what the result is going to be. Okay, that's the usual academic or academic case study. But it can also, if you think about case studies, it can also be a conversation with somebody, right? So, if you're having a conversation with somebody, be like, yeah, this is what happened to me. This is the situation I was in. How would you have dealt with this? And what do you think would have happened? And then they'll tell you what they think they should do and how they could apply some, leadership strategy or leadership knowledge. And you can debrief with them, right? Be like, okay, yeah, I think that's a good or bad idea. This is what I did, and this is why it was successful or unsuccessful, right? So case studies don't need to be pen and paper all the time. They don't need to exist only in academia. We can use case studies to develop leaders, but in a more discursive or conversational manner. Um, just talking about some brief leadership lessons I've learned over my career. I've already told you about the first one. Sometimes people don't ask you to be a leader. Either you are or you're not. Okay. My next lesson that I learned is that if your staff fail, it's because you have. I had a server one time who I was developing, and he was looking to me for advice, and I was busy because I was doing something else, and I didn't really develop him properly. I come in 2 days later, or sorry, the next day, and I sit down with my GM, and I said, "What's your plan for the day?" And he's telling me what he's going to do, and he's like, "Oh yeah, by the way, we're going to fire this person." And I'm like, "Whoa, why?" I was training that person. Why are you firing him? And my GM was like, "Listen, he's just not doing his job well. He's talking too much with other staff. He's not doing his side work. He's eating food. He's going behind the line and eating food, and these things." And I'm like, "Okay, those are all really good reasons for someone to get fired within their probationary period." But I felt really bad. I'm like, you know what I mean? Like, I was his trainer. I should have prevented this somehow, or what did I miss in his training that made him think that it was okay to do a lot of these things, right? And I felt like I said, this guy had I felt really bad. This guy had no idea it was coming. He was going to be totally blindsided when he's having this awful conversation with my GM. And I realized upon reflection, again, reflection, is that it wasn't this person that failed. It was me. This is my fault. It wasn't this person's fault that he's being fired. I mean, yeah, it was his behavior that got him fired. However, I didn't tell him it wasn't okay to do those things. Yes, some of them were fairly common sense. However, a failure on your staff's part is a failure on you as a leader. Okay, the standard you walk by is the standard you set. So the kicker to this story is this person obviously got fired. I felt terrible. He went over to the restaurant next door. He got hired on as a server, and within a couple months, they made him a manager. Right. So not only had I failed that staff member, in not developing and being a leader for them, however, I failed or put our company, our restaurant at a disadvantage because that person went on to a different company and became a leader himself. So that person could have been a leader with my company. Next lesson I learned was trust is absolutely key in leadership. Okay, vulnerability as well. That's how you create leadership. We already talked about after event reviews and how being vulnerable and asking for feedback helps create trust between a follower and leaders. I'm trying to think of an example I could use there. So there was a server that I had, and she was a good server. She had good reviews from customers. However, not a whole lot of people liked her. Staff, I mean, and it was she seemed unhappy. Other people didn't like working with her, and it came down to having a conversation with her, right? So like she was cashing out with me, and I was like, she was asking how my shift was, and I was good, and she seemed like a really genuine person, like a really nice and genuine person. So I honestly just straight up asked, I'm like, why do people not like working with you? And she said, she's like, honestly, I don't know. And I'm so happy you asked that because I could tell the exact same thing. And I have no idea what it is. I'm like, I know, like, you seem like a perfectly fine individual to me. Like, you're not not a bad person. You speak your mind. You know what I mean? Like, you're perfectly fine as an individual. Like, you're not a bad person. And I was like, maybe you should, open up to people, right? Speak to them, ask how their day was and stuff like that. And um, in doing that, in being real and not fake with my staff member in this particular case, it helped build trust between me and her because she understood that I was going to be real with her. I was going to talk as a human being and not somebody else. I wasn't going to be a manager. I was going to you know speak reality or the truth, right? And that helped create trust between her and I. Now, while that's how her and I built trust, it's going to differ from person to person. Again, everybody has different motivations, different perspectives, different upbringings, everything like that. But trust is absolutely key. And one way to increase trust between a leader and their followers is to ask for feedback. Which is what we call after event reviews, which exposes the leader to a little bit of vulnerability to create that trust. After your followers see that you're vulnerable to some degree or you're willing to be vulnerable to them, they trust you because they're always vulnerable to you. My last piece that I'll give you is that a leader must always know when to follow. One of the videos I'm going to post for you this week is that I forget what his name is right now because I haven't quite looked it up and posted it yet. It's somebody high up in the American military and the intelligence community, and he's giving an address to first-year officers in the Air Force. So he came from an Air Force background against the military, and one of the pieces of information, and it's a great video. You only have to watch about 45 minutes of it, but one of his leadership lessons to that entire congregation of first-year officers was that your people are better than you, or at least they should be. And he gives many examples of his staff, his staff or his officers jumping in when he wouldn't to do something. For me, I know when my expertise has been exhausted. If someone asks me to comment on something I know nothing about, I refer them to somebody else within my team. For example, I might know nothing about butchery, although there are some butchery components in the courses I teach. If I'm asking me to give a comment about butchery, I would defer them to somebody else within my team. For example, Chef Malow, who runs a butcher shop, right? I would follow him in that case instead of myself, even though I'm the leader of him in my team. So we've already kind of talked about how to implement or what the service profit chain is, how to implement it through servant leadership, what happens through implementing it, but we need to be able to measure that the service profit chain is having some sort of effect to justify leadership development in that area, right? So we need to be able to measure leadership abilities of our people, of our leaders in our company. We must also be able to measure employee satisfaction as well as customer satisfaction and loyalty, right? while there are multi-item scales to measure employee and customer satisfaction, can we do it in a less obtrusive way, right? So yes, we can measure employee satisfaction and customer satisfaction with a questionnaire, but is there another way we can measure these things, right? Are there emotions? We've done a lot of reading about emotions in service. Can we monitor emotions through participant observation to gain an indication of employee satisfaction and even customer satisfaction? I think in a lot of cases we can. One comment I made to a different set of students is that, yeah, serve qual is great. Yes, service quality questionnaires are great and customer satisfaction questionnaires are great, but any good service management leader can stand in their dining room, look around, and tell you how their night is going by looking at the faces of people. If servers and cooks are smiling and they're laughing and they're happy, that is great. That is employee satisfaction. If your customers are smiling, laughing, and having a great time, that is customer satisfaction. So you can get a general gauge on this through just participant observation of your staff and your customers. However, in the following slides, we're going to talk a little bit more about ServQual and ServPerf. So measuring customer satisfaction. Traditionally, we use Zeithamel's ServQual, which assesses a service's or the quality of service with respect to 5 dimensions. So tangibles, the physical environment; reliability, which is the dependability of the service provider; responsiveness, which is the ability of the service provider to respond and communicate with customers; assurance, which is just how comfortable or what the customer thinks about how well they've been taken care of; and empathy, or the ability to give customers individualized personal attention. ServQual is not directly a measure of customer satisfaction. Again, it's just a measure of service quality, but we have found through research that service quality has a positive correlation or relationship with customer satisfaction. So to increase any one of 5 dimensions with respect to service quality also increases customer satisfaction. These 5 dimensions are also linked to the 5 gaps in customer expectations. To measure employee satisfaction, we have to identify, or at least understand, that our staff are internal customers of our leadership service. Again, receiving service from our management teams. And when you think about it, what is really the difference between your staff and your customers, right? They both have power to some degree. They are both salient stakeholders. There's obviously our staff come in uniforms and work for us, and our customers don't. So there's a different dynamic there. But with regards to the quality of or the satisfaction of our employees and our customers, there's very little different in terms of measurement. They're receiving service and thus can be measured in the same way, with some subtle differences. So instead of using ServQual to measure customer satisfaction, we can use ServPerf to measure the service leader's ability to give good service to their internal customers or their staff. Okay, it uses the very same 5 dimensions of service quality that ServQual use, just from a different perspective. And yeah. So while when we use ServPerf, we're essentially measuring internal service quality, okay? Does that mean job satisfaction immediately? Not necessarily. Just like ServQual does not mean customer satisfaction, it means service quality, but service quality is an antecedent of customer satisfaction. So very similarly, internal service quality, which is again the service that leaders provide followers, internal service quality is an antecedent for job satisfaction or employee satisfaction. Okay, Internal service quality has also has been identified by the research to have a positive correlation with job satisfaction and the dimensions of employee satisfaction. Specifically, internal service quality has a positive effect on appraisals over pay, promotion, evaluations of supervisors, of other coworkers, of the nature of employees' work, and of communication. So to increase internal service quality, you also would increase job satisfaction, as illustrated by the service profit chain and measured through ServPerf. So again, ServPerf measures internal service quality and thus, to some degree, job satisfaction, because internal service quality has a positive correlation on employee satisfaction or job satisfaction. So just before we get to some of the items for next week, just a quick little debrief over some of the things we talked about. Okay, we talked about leadership styles. We talked about what leadership is as opposed to management and how they contrast with each other. We talked about the service profit chain, the links in the chain. We've also talked about developing leaders for the service profit chain. We've also talked about measuring, our operations to make sure that the service profit chain is actually having an impact on our business. What I really want you to get out of this, or at least have a holistic understanding of, is that leadership is absolutely key to the service profit chain, because servant leadership increases internal service quality. As you increase internal service quality, you increase employee satisfaction. When employee satisfaction is increased, you also have increased customer satisfaction, leading to customer loyalty, leading to profitability and growth. As we've shown, leadership development or service leadership development does not have to be costly, but it has to be designed so that leaders are continuously reflecting, they are continuously learning and developing on an ongoing basis. So it's more of it's intentional, but it doesn't need to cost a lot of money. For example, asking for feedback, reflecting on performance, using a verbal case study with one of your developing leaders does not have to cost you any money. It costs you time to have that conversation. Okay. So for next week, please read the articles posted about service predisposition and empowerment. Familiarize yourself with our new case study assessment. Maybe plan a group meeting. Okay, so you should be able to start your this case study pretty much immediately in identifying the issues and the what maybe the causes of the issues. And your personal reflection is due Sunday by midnight, so Sunday of week 12. Okay. Also for next week, remember to stay healthy. Okay, so I know we're online right now, and there's a lot of weird stuff going on with COVID-19. Eat nutritious food, drink lots of water, get some sunlight. They've said that vitamin D is good for you right now, and try to do some exercises. So while we're kind of confined to the house right now, Kaveri has been doing push-ups on the stairs. She's been doing laps up and down the stairs. We don't have any weights because I don't work out. She's been lifting large water bottles, doing flies, and trying to use it as bench press. Get some exercise, okay? Also reach out to your classmates. Some sort of some resemblance of society while you're isolating, or if you are self-isolating, is good, right? So ask how the people are doing. Check in on people, check in on me, things like that. So just because we're online doesn't mean we need to be disconnected from each other, right? If you're having any concerns, and this is especially important for international students at this point, but not exclusive, of course, reach out to Chef Bennett if you have any concerns. Okay, we'll try to help. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of resources available to students through either the government or the college. And if you're having concerns or have some problems, let us know. We could probably help direct you, although I don't know for sure. Okay, it depends on the problem or the issue. Remember, and the last point here is to remember to change from your daytime pajamas into your nighttime pajamas. Currently, I am wearing my daytime pajamas while making this video. One of the nice pieces of not having to go on campus, if there is a nice piece, it's that we don't have to look as formal or wear jeans. Right? We can do online classes in our pajamas in our own time. Okay. So if you have any questions, please let me know. Feel free to email me. I know I'm a little backlogged on my emails right now, but if it is quite urgent, then I will address it immediately. And yeah, see everyone for Monday office hours. Thanks.